this stuff in first year. So, but if anyone needs me to elaborate further, just let me know. So as you can see, we did the timeline, we did the formula, we did the inputs, and we also got the answer. So we tried to stick to that 4-step approach as much as possible. Now, the correct answer here is 2,661.21. So well done on everyone getting the right answer. Let's get to the second question then. If you're selling the house 5 years after the mortgage starts, how much do you still owe to the bank? So if you sell the house 5 years later, first things first, what are we trying to figure out here? What's the unknown? Yep. So we want to figure out what is the loan. So the present value of the loan 5 years from now. Now let's think about it. If we're today and we got into this loan, and every month we pay, 2,661.21 or whatever that was, 2,060. So every month we pay 2,661.21 for how long? We do so for 5 years, right? Now, how many months is 5 years? Yep. So this is us. We are here today. We just got the loan. Fast forward 60 months. So in other words, for the next 5 years, for the next 60 months, we're just going to keep paying whatever we figured out in the previous question. We're going to pay 2,661 each month. So January, February, whatever, for the next 60 months. After 5 years, we kind of ask ourselves, well, you know what? Let's sell this house, right? Now, you would assume the house has appreciated in value, but there's still a mortgage outstanding, right? We don't really care about what the value of the house is. We care about what is the value of the mortgage. Now, if we fast forward 60 months from then, that becomes our present value. Right? This has already happened. We are here now. This is us now, right? And what we want is to figure out what is, so based on the following cash flow stream from 61 all the way to 360, we still know that we're going to be paying, if we didn't sell the house, we're going to be paying 2,261, 2,661.21, 2,661.21, all the way till the end of the loan. So in other words, if we were to discount this back to present value being 5 years from now, what is the value of this home loan? So we know this is 2,661.21. We know the interest rate that's already given to us. So the interest rate here is 7% over 12. And we know that our N now is, what is our N? How long have we got left on the home loan here? We started with 360 months. How many months have we got left 5 years from now? 300, right? So N here is 300 months. So we've gone past the 5-year mark. We are now at 5 years. The question is, do we sell? If we sell, there's still a home loan outstanding. Now we know that every month for the remainder of the loan, we still have to pay 2,661 in month 61, in month 62, in month 63, all the way to month 360. The question is, what is the present value of this loan 5 years from now, knowing that there are 300 months left? The interest rate is the same, 7% annual, and the payment amount is 2,661. So we can use the PV function in Excel to calculate the present value of the loan. So let me know in the chat if everyone gets this right. I won't even bother with Excel. We used the function last week. Have a crack, everyone. Yep. Well done. Well done, everyone. So the remaining home loan is 376,526. Now, intuitively, if we think about it, does it make sense that the home loan is not more than 400,000? You know, if you think about it, you know, this is our time. This is the home loan here. We started at time 0 at 400, right? Now, if you think about it, as we pay the loan, you know, as we pay the loan over time, it has to get lower and lower, right? So intuitively, if for some reason we ended up getting 405,000 or whatever, we know it's wrong. Because if we think about it, each month we pay for the home loan. It makes sense that the principal, the 400,000 that was initially borrowed, it gets lower and lower each time. So it makes sense that after 5 years, you know, we've actually paid off 25,000, 24,000, or 23,500 or whatever from the initial amount borrowed. Okay, so you know, always sort of step back and think, well, does it make sense? Like, is like, yeah, it should make sense because we're paying it off. So, well done, everyone. The correct answer is 376,526. Now, how much will your monthly payment increase if the rate is increased by 50 basis points 5 years after the mortgage starts? So let's sit there for a second. What is 50 basis points in percentages? Yeah, it's 0.5%, isn't it? Now, what was the interest rate previously? So interest rate initially. So initially it was 7.5%, but now it actually goes up by 0.5%. That's what this question is telling us, right? The rate is going to go up by 50 basis points, 0.5%. So in other words, the new rate is 7.5%. Now that's pretty normal. Like, you think about it, it's a 30-year mortgage, right? It's a floating mortgage. In other words, the interest rate changes, right? It's going to go up, it's going to go down, like depending on the economy and whatever, and the central bank and whatnot. So 5 years later, it actually has gone up by 50 basis points. So in other words, we've actually gone from 7% initially to 7.5%. Okay, divided by 12. Because it's 5 years after, so we've got 300 months left. And we know from the previous question that the present value was whatever we calculated, 376,526.36. So the question here is, well, how much are we paying? What is the new payment amount? So in a sense, we're doing question A, but this time a couple of variables have changed. We've gone from 7% to 7.5%. We've gone from 360 months to 300 months. So let's think about it for a second. Do we expect more or less the payment to be? We've got less time on the thing, but more importantly, the interest rates has gone up. Yep, exactly. So we know that this payment thing has to go up because the rate has gone up by 50 basis points. All of else is as is, but it makes sense that the payment amount will be more. And if we calculate it, you'll find that the payment using the PMT function gives us 2,782. So what is the difference from the previous one? 278 2,782.50 less what was the previous one? 2,660. 121. So 121 more is what we pay. Are we okay with that? So really, it was the C that was the unknown. All else was given to us, but we have to remember that the rate has increased to 7.5%. Now, what happens if you can't afford the extra payment? How much longer will you have to pay the mortgage at the original monthly payment? So what's the unknown here now? What are we trying to find? The period. Well done. So think about it, right? What is this question asking us? Well, you know, you borrowed, now you can't pay more. You borrowed the money, the interest rate has gone up, but you can't afford to pay the additional $121 a month. That's cool. You go to the bank, you say, I can't pay it, I can only pay whatever was initially borrowed, because remember, it's 100% debt. The bank says, cool, you're going to pay the same, but we will extend the term of your loan. So we know that we got 376K, the present value that we calculated from the previous in question B. We know from the question that the original monthly payment will apply to 2,661.26. And we also know that the rate is what it was initially. So in other words, the rate is 7.5% divided by 12. So the rate has gone up. What we want to figure out is, well, how much longer? So N, in terms of months, how many months will we be paying for this home loan? So rather than, whatever it was, 300 months. So remember, 300 was what was left. That's 5 years. Naturally, this has to increase to more months. You're going to have to pay for, because you're paying lower, you're paying the same rate that you paid initially, but the interest rate has gone up. So how many more months do you think? So we can use the N per function, number of periods function in Excel to calculate the number of months. Yep, 346, right? So if you use the N per function, this is our present value, 376,526. This is our payment amount, 2,661.26. And the interest rate is 7.5%. So using the N per function, you will end up getting 346 months, right? So in other words, instead of paying 300 months, which was the initial arrangement, 5 years after, you will extend it for another 46 months. So what's that divided by 12? About 3.8 years or whatever it is, additional payments. How does everyone feel about this question from 1 to 10? 1 is like, I just no idea, I got no idea what just happened, and 10 is like, yeah, pretty comfortable. Yep, 8, yep, 5, 8, yep, 7. Yeah, solid 5. Good. Any questions, guys, before we move on to the next one? All right, happy with the scores. Yep, 7s and 8s, good. All right. Let's have a look at the next one. It is presently July the 1st, 2016. You need to raise 10,000 bucks by July 21. You can invest the money in your bank to earn 8% compounded annually. So first things first, what is our timeline here? How many years are we sort of talking? Yep, so 5 years. So we started 2016, right? And then we go to 2021. We've got $10,000 we need to raise. So first things first, what is the $10,000? That's the future value, right? So the $10,000 is the future value, right? Now, the question here is, if you decide to make equal annual payments beginning of July the 1st, what is the amount of each payment? So let's think about it for a second. If I do the timeline, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we've got our 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. We know from the question, and let's read it again, you can invest your money to earn 8% return, and you need to raise $10,000 in 5 years' time. So in other words, the future value is $10,000. The interest rate here is 8%. And we know from the timeline that we have 5 years. So what do we have here? We want to find out the value of the payment, right? So in other words, let's go ahead and use the PMT function. We've got an ordinary annuity here. The future value is 10,000. So we want to get to the future value of $10,000. We're going to be earning 8% each year. We're going to be earning 8% for the next 5 years, plus 8%. And we want to figure out, well, what is the cash flow amount? How much do we have to pay, contribute each year to get to $10,000? Pearson questions are you're gonna have weekly you're gonna have weekly exercises, but your activities are there will be 5 activities that you have to that you're gonna be assessed on, like after class. You gotta check your Moodle page. So were you not here last week? So if you go to your Moodle, go to the schedule. So it's due on the 14th. So that's in 10 days time. So it's due on effectively on Friday the 14th or Sunday plus 2 days if you like. So that's what you have to do. But you can have weekly exercises if you want to. You're just not gonna get marked on it. Every week there's questions in Pearson, but they're just for you to do if you want. Yeah. So it's June 14th of August by midday. Yep, cool. Any other questions? Yeah, there's a study plan you can refer to as well. Yeah, that's the first assignment. You'll cover what we have so far. It's not really an assignment, it's just like a questionnaire. I wouldn't call it an assignment, but sure. All good. All right, guys. Yep. So well done. I've seen some of the answers in the chat as well. So if you use the payment function, it's important to understand the concept. So we are given the future value. It's a 5-year timeline. Interest rate is 8%. Remember, it was annually compounded. So happy days, because when it's an annually compounded rate, no adjustments, no frequency or different frequency of compounding, none of that. So straight out future value of an ordinary annuity formula, putting the payment function in a spreadsheet, and Bob's your uncle, we get the right answer there. So well done, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone is comfortable with that. Question 2, same story, but this time your dad offers to make a payment calculated above, or to give you 7,500 the following year. So what is this question asking us? Well, your dad is going to give you 2 options. One is you get, 10,000 bucks in year 5, right? So 10,000 bucks, your future value in year 5. The other option is he gives you 7,500 a year from now. So in other words, we've got a year less because it's 2017. So a year from now, 2018, all the way to 2021, we've got 4 years there. Which of the 2 options is better? So one is he's going to give you 10,000 bucks in 2021 or whatever. The other option is 2021. The other option is if he gives you 7,500 next year, 2017, and that grows at 8% for 4 years, what does that accumulate to be? So straight out future value formula, we got the present value of 7,500, the interest rate of 8%, and the time of 4 years. So which one's worth more, 10,000 in 5 years' time, or 7,500 given tomorrow, next year, growing at 8% for 4 years? Next year, yep. So this ends up being 10,203.67. So this is the option you want to go with, option 2, right? If you have a look at the question, you're better off getting the 7,500 next year, because remember now we're in 2016 times 0. Next year is 2017. Let it grow for 8 years at 8%, for 4 years at 8%, and that's what we get. All right. Now, what happens if your father offers to deposit 1860 annually from 2017, what is the compounded rate of interest you must earn to reach your target? Remember, our target is $10,000. That's our future value. And in this question here, your father now offers a deposit of 1860. So in other words, our interest, the payment amount is 1860. What's the rate? So we can use the rate function in Excel. Yeah, 363 or 4%. You can round it up. But if we use the rate function in Excel, we end up getting, make sure you expand. If you're getting 4%, that's a good point actually. If you're getting 4% on your as your response, and I'm just going to jump into it for a second. Make sure you expand your, I'll show you that in a second. So you might have gotten 4% because you got your decimals reduced. So if you want to expand your decimals, you have to go to the increased decimal on your ribbon where my cursor is. So your 4% will become 363. So we encourage everyone to at least go 2 decimal places to try and answer this question. Okay. So so you go 4% there, expand the decimals, and you will get the right answer there. I mean, 4% is still correct. It's just that you want to show 2 decimals. Okay. That's because it's start of July rather than end. So if you read the question, although I don't think it mentioned, so the annual payment is beginning on July 2017. So you've got the whole 2017, the whole 2018, the whole 2019, the whole 2020, the whole 2021. Okay. All right. Last question before we get the break. Because it's BMT because annually, so because it's a repetitive motion, so the payment is 1860 annually. So you get deposited every year 1860 for the next 5 years, right? So you get deposited 1860 every year. So that constitutes your payment, your cash flow, rather than the present value, because you have the future value of 10,000, and your payment amount is 1860 every year, or your deposit amount is 1860 every year. So that's why it's the payment. Now, your father offers you to $4,000 today if you get a part-time job to earn sufficiently and make half-yearly deposits. As well, the bank agrees to compound your rate at 8% semi-annually. Calculate the value of each deposit you must earn. So let's think about it for a second. We've got 4,000 given to us today. It's compounded at 8%, but it's semi-annual. Okay. So 8%. So in other words, what does that work out to be? That's per annum. So what do we need to do to the rate? So divided by 2, yep. So we have to divide the rate by 2 because the compounding frequency is semi-annual. So in other words, we know that the initial payment was 5 years. We're going to double that. So we got 10 periods. So from 0 to 1 to 3, all the way to 10. That's our timeline. We know that the future value is 10,000 from the question. And the question is, well, what is you're going to receive 4,000 today. That's what the question tells us. You're going to receive 4,000 today. What is the deposit or the payment amount you have to get to $10,000? So if we think about it, we've got the $10,000. We need to figure out what is the coupon amount, right? I'm going to use that. So figure out what is the coupon and then add the $4,000 that you receive initially over 10 times at 4% over 10 periods. So this one's a little bit complicated because there's two aspects to it. One is the coupon component, right? So we've got the coupon that or the payment amount that we have to figure out. This is initially given to us. So 4,000 that is offered. So that's given initially. 4,000 given today. And we can use our annuity formula to figure out the payment amount. So payment function can apply here again. So I'm going to show you how we can do it in a spreadsheet using all of the functions, all of the parameters. So what we've got here is a timeline. So starting today, we receive $4,000 from Dad. And then every 6 months, we will deposit some sort of payment amount, which is what we need to calculate to get to $10,000 at the end of the timeline. Right. So every month, every 6 months, we're going to have to contribute something. The question is, what is it that we have to contribute? How much do we have to contribute to the bank? So let's use the payment function, PMT, open the brackets. The rate is given to us in the question. It's 8%, but that's yearly. So we're going to divide it by 2 to make it a semi-annual rate. The number of periods, the timeline is for 5 years, but it's semi-annual. So we're going to multiply that by 2. Remember, whatever we do to the rate, we do the opposite to the period. We divide the rate, we multiply the period. The present value is 4,000. That's the lump sum that we initially received. That's the present value. We are today in present terms. That is the lump sum. And the future value is $10,000. And it's an ordinary annuity. So as you can see here, we actually used up all of the arguments given to us. And that gives us the payment amount of $339.75. So in other words, if we pay $339.75 every 6 months for the next 10 periods, we'll accumulate starting at 4,000 in the bank and adding 339 every 6 months, we will get to 10,000 5 years from today. The negative 10,000 is the reason why we put negative 10,000 is that's just an Excel glitch. We talked about it last week as well. If you're using positive present value, put the negative as future value, or vice versa. If you're putting negative as present value, put the positive as future value. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense, but we're gonna just do it. So just keep that in mind, just a mental note. Any questions, guys? All right. If no questions, let's grab a quick break. And then I'll pass it to Ha-Chen to take you through the second half.
Okay, just let's take a 2 minutes break, and after 6:07, and we will come back and continue the second half. Okay, everyone, welcome back. So let's continue the second half. So you already know how to use the PMT function to do some calculation in question 1 and question 2. And in the following questions, we are going to learn how to have a better understanding about these formulas. So let's start with question 3. So we already know what is the annuity, ordinary annuity, and annuity due. And we also know that we can use type to change whether I want to get the value of annuity due or ordinary annuity. And in question 3, we are going to have another type of annuity, which is called as deferred annuity. So the key idea is that I'm not going to receive the first cash flow at the beginning or next year. I'm going to receive the first cash flow after a couple of years or a couple of periods. For example, in question 3, it says we want to know what's going to be the present value of a full period annuity, $200 per year, and begins 2 years from today. Interest rate, 9%. So first thing I would do with this question is that I'm going to draw a very quick and a very simple timeline. If I'm going to draw the timeline, 0 represents today and 1, 2, which means after 2 years, I'm going to start to have some cash flows caused by this annuity. So I will receive my first cash flow here. And then 3, 4, 5, I'm going to have this $200 for 4 years. That's the timeline. That's the cash flow structure of this annuity. And I will just call this one as PMT. And the question asks, what is the present value of this annuity? So which means I want to know something here. And I will call this as present value. So this is how we draw the timeline. And we learned this from the last week. So now this will become the timeline. And at the same time, I also know that the interest rate, it should be just 9%. That's all the information I can get from the question. Then the next step is to calculate what is the present value. So you already know how to put all these numbers into your formula. So definitely you will know that this PMT will be the PMT. And I'm going to calculate the PV, and this will be the discount rate. I already have all this information. But the tricky part here is that normally when we use the function, I mean, for most functions, also most formulas in your formula sheet, when you apply all these numbers, what you get, the value you get will be the value 1 period before the first payment. That's for most cases. So for example, in this question, if I'm going to use the PV function, I use the PV function, rate is just 9%. Amper, what's going to be the amper in this question? We use amper to reflect how many period, how many cash flows we have. And in this question, amper will be 4 because we have four cash flows starting from 10.2 to 10.5. So we will have 5 payments. We will have 4 payments. So which means we should use amper as 4. So at this stage, you can just ignore all the other things. It will feel like, how about I just look at this part? How about I just look at this part? If I just look these blue cells, then I'm going to use my PV function. I don't care whether this is deferred or not. I just use my the PV function. Rate is 9%. Amper in this case will be 4 because there are 4 periods in between in the blue cells. PMT is just 200. Last week, we mentioned that PMT is represented periodic payments with the payment for each period. And then FV, in this question, we do not have any other cash flow at the ending point. So FV just 0, or we can leave this as blank. Then we can move to the type function. Type, we can just use 0. Because if we use type as 0, it means we assume all the cash flows, they happen at the end of period, which is ordinary annuity. So in this question, if I'm going to use type as 0, this is what I get. I use the PV function, I get this one. But this PV function, this result is not the one I'm looking for in the timeline. The reason is just the thing I mentioned before. For most formula and most function, when you just apply them, what you get is the value at one time point before the first cash flow. So in this cash flow structure, this is my first cash flow from the annuity. Then it means when I'm going to apply the annuity formula, the value I get, this one, is the value at one time point before the first cash flow, which means it's the value here. So I would call this as PV1. So which means when I use this formula, I get the value here, not the value in the green cell. And eventually, because we want to know what is the PV0, what's the present value, what's the value today. So there will be one more further step. I need to discount this PV1 to PV0. How can I do this? I can do this by 2 ways. The first one, I can just simply apply the formula. I can do some manual calculation. When I say manual calculation, it means I can just use this one divided by 1 plus interest rate. This is how we do discount. If you are going to discount for 1 period, you just divide it by 1 plus interest rate. Then this will be our final result. This will be the value in the green cell. And I will show the formula text, so in case you want to know how I get the result. So this is how we do the calculation. And this is why I say for most questions, most formula, most function, when you do the calculation, when you apply the function, the value you get is just the value one time point before the first cash flow. So which means in this question, I can actually call this one as CF2, right? This is my first cash flow, but it happens at 10.2. I just say cash flow at time 2. So this is my first cash flow. So it means when I just apply the formula, I get 1. I get the value at 10.1. And then if I want to know what is the PV0, I need to do the discount once again. This is the idea here. And when I say, and because I just mentioned this, and I say it's for most formula, what's the exception in this unit is that if I use type as 0. So in this formula, I use type as, sorry, what if I use type as 1? So in this formula, I use type as 0. It means I'm assuming this is the ordinary annuity. And if I'm going to use a very similar formula here, all the things are the same. I use the same rate, the same emperor, the same PMT, and the same PMT, and the same FV. But the only difference is now I'm going to use 1 as the type parameter. I call this is 1. Then I get another number. What's this? I will call this as PV2. So I will give a color here so that you can know what it represents. It represents the value here. So if you are going to use type as 1, which means you assume this annuity is an annuity due, then when you are using the formula, you get the value exactly at the time point of your first cash flow. And if you do things like this, and eventually we want to get PV0, then I need to do the discount again. And how can I do this discount? The first method, I can do this manual discount by myself. I use the PV2 divided by 1 plus interest rate and to the power of 2, because I'm going to discount PV2 for 2 periods so that I can get PV0. And another way to do this calculation is that you can use the PV function from week 1. In week 1, we teach you how to use PV function. And in week 1, we say you can just set PMT as 0, because in week 1, when you do the discount, you only get 1 single cash flow. So same idea here. I can treat PV2 as the only one, the only single cash flow. And I want to discount this PV2 for 2 periods. How can I do this? I set rate and I set emperor. Now emperor will become 2, because I'm going to discount PV2 back to PV0. So emperor will be 2. And now I'm discounting 1 single cash flow. So there is no PMT, PMT just as 0 or blank. FV will be this one, because I'm going to discount this future value back to PV0. And then that's it. So this is another way to do the calculation. So here I show this, I show both methods. And the key takeaway from this question is that you need to know that when you apply the formula, what's the outcome? You cannot just apply the formula, say, well, after I finish the formula, I get a result. You need to know what's that value. Is the value at 10.1 or is the value at 10.0? Based on the timeline, we know that we want to get PV0. But if you just apply the formula, what you can get is PV1 or PV2, depends on which method you are going to use. So there will be one more further step. You need to do this discount by yourself so that you can get PV0. This is the key takeaway from question 3. So overall, question 3 is not very difficult, it's not very challenging, because it's a very basic structure. All you have is just one annuity. And I provide 2 methods to do the calculation so that you can get the final result, PV0. And just please remember that you are not restricted to one calculation method. So it's completely up to you. If you want to use method 1, it's okay. If you like method 2, it's your choice. It's completely up to you. The key idea is that you need to draw the timeline, and you need to know that if I'm going to call the PV function here, what kind of result I will get, what kind of outcome I will receive from this function. That's the most important part. So this is for question 3. And then we are going to move to question 4, which is the very typical questions for this week. This one is more challenging because now we have a more complex cash flow structure. So in this question, you are given a cash flow structure for one company. And you know that year 1, there will be 1 cash flow, year 2 to year 5, there will be another cash flow, and year 6 until 4 hours, there will be 50,000 as your cash flow. So we already know the cash flow structure, and later I will transfer this table into the timeline. And before we move to the timeline, you also need to understand what's the meaning of this question? It says, what is the maximum price you will pay for this company if the discount rate is 12%? What's the meaning of maximum price you would like to pay? I know the cash flow of this firm. I know if I have this firm, how much cash flow I will receive in the future. And the maximum price I should pay for this firm, it will be the value of all these cash flows. Because if the value of all this cash flow is just $100, I should not pay $200 to purchase something which the value is $100. That's the idea here. The maximum price you should pay is the value of the firm. And the value of the firm is determined by the value of cash flow. So this is the key idea of this question. You are given some cash flows, and we want to know what is the value of all the cash flows. So this is the first step. You need to know what's the meaning of maximum price I should pay. It means I want to know what is the value of all these cash flows. Then next step, I'm going to draw a timeline so that I don't have to look at the questions anymore. I can just focus on the timeline. And this timeline is quite straightforward. I'm starting from 10.1, and at 10.1, I'm starting from 10.0, and at 10.1, I got my first cash flow, 20,000. And from 2, 3, 4, 5, for these 4 periods, I'm going to have 30,000. And starting from 10.6 until 4 hours, I will receive this 50,000. That's my timeline. And I can call this as CF. It represents cash flow. And then eventually, I want to get the present value, which should be the cell here. I want to know what's going to be the value in the green cell. So now this will be my timeline. And I also know the rate is 12%. So now I have the timeline, so I don't have to look at the questions anymore. I can just focus on the timeline. And in this question, if I want to know what's the value of all these cash flows, it means I need to discount all the cash flows back to 10.0. But this question is very interesting because you have infinity cash flows, because starting from 10.6, the cash flows will last forever. But actually there are 3 types of cash flows. The first one is the cash flow 1, the CF1. So this one is the cash flow. This is one single cash flow. It's just 20,000. There is no any other pattern. So I can just take this part out. I take this part here. And I can call this as single cash flow. So this is the first part of this timeline. I want to look at them separately. This one is the single cash flow. And then I'm going to take this part out. I only look at the cash flow from 10.2 to 10.5. This will be the annuity. And more precisely, this will be the deferred annuity. We have 4 cash flows. We have 4 payments, and starting from 10.2 until 10.5. This one is exactly the same thing as we have in question 3. Similar logic here. And I will call this as annuity. And the last part will be starting from 10.6. I don't need numbers here. All I need to look at is the one starting from 10.6 until 4 hours. This one will be the perpetuity. Perpetuity. I think I missed one E. Yeah, perpetuity. So now we have 3 types of cash flows, and we want to know what's going to be the present value of different types of cash flows. And there will be some calculation involved. So first, we can start from the first one, the easiest one, the single cash flow. So I want to know what's going to be the present value of this single cash flow. You can do this by 2 ways. The first one, do the manual calculation. The second one, you can use the PV function. It's completely up to you. So I want to get PV0. So the first thing I can do is that I can apply the PV function. If I'm going to use the PV function, rate is 12%. Emperor is just 1 because all I need to do is just discount this single cash flow for 1 period. PMT is 0 because this is the single cash flow, so we do not have anything like PMT. Future value, this will be the 20,000. I'm going to discount this 20,000 in the future back to 10.0. That's the logic here. And tap, we don't have to worry about this. And this one is going to be the result. This one will be the present value of the first cash flow, which is the present value of CF1. And then I'm going to show you the formula text. So this is the first method to do this. And sometimes if it's just for 1 period and students think, well, it's a little bit time consuming to type the formula. So students, they may want to do the manual calculation. So it's completely up to you. If you want to do the manual calculation, you use this one divided by 1 plus discount rate. So similar idea here. All you need to do is just discount for 1 period, and then you get the same result. And if you don't like the negative number here, you can just use the ABS function. Oops, sorry, not this one. The ABS function. Then that's it. You get the same result. So it's completely up to you which method you like to use. But the key idea is that you can understand the logic here. And next one, the next cash flow, it will be the annuity. And this is the annuity from 10.2 to 10.5. So similar thing as question 3. I'm going to apply the annuity function first. So I use annuity function first. When I use this function, I use PV, and I use rate as 12%, Emperor as 4, because I have 4 annuity cash flows. PMT is the 30,000. FV is 0. We do not have any other cash flow rather than the annuity payment, the constant payment. So there is no future payment. There is no future value in this timeline. So future value, you can just use 0 or as blank, type as 0. So most of the time, I would recommend you to use type as 0 because it's much easier. Now you get the result. And if you are applying this formula, what's this value? This is not the PV0. Eventually, we want to get PV0, but this one is not PV0 because we just applied this annuity function with type as 0. So actually, this one is called as PV1. So I'm going to change this a little bit so that we can have the positive result. Yes, and I'm going to give a color here. So this one actually is PV1. Because we are applying the annuity function, we are applying the ordinary annuity function. What we get is just the value 110 point before the first cash flow, first annuity cash flow. And this is the value here. And eventually, we want to get PV0. So one more step, you need to discount this one back to PV0. And to do this, I'm going to use this one divided by 1 plus interest rate. So I can do the manual calculation here. I will show you the formula text. So then I can complete this instruction. First step is going to use annuity function so that we can get PV1. Then discount to PV0. This is how we do the calculation for annuity. And this one will be labeled as green. Same one here. Yeah. So you can use different colors so that you can know what's that number. So this is how we do annuity. And one last thing is perpetuity. We do not have any Excel function for perpetuity, but we do have a formula for perpetuity. And in your formula sheet, you will know that the formula for perpetuity will be PV0 equal to CF1 divided by R, which R represents discount rate. So this is the formula you learn from your lecture or from your formula sheets. So this is the formula for perpetuity. And what you can tell from this formula? Remember in question 3, I mentioned that for most formula, most function, the value you get is 1 time point before the first cash flow. So can you see the pattern here? When you are using the formula for perpetuity, when you are using CF1 in the formula, what do you get? You get PV0 is the value 1 time point before the first cash flow. And then the next step is that if I already have this formula, is that possible? I'm going to rearrange this formula, adjust this formula a little bit so that I can apply this formula in this question. In this question, do we have CF1 as perpetuity? No, the perpetuity starts from time point 6. This is the first perpetuity cash flow. And after that, we will continuously to have this 50,000 until forever. So the perpetuity is starting from time point 6, which means the first perpetuity cash flow should be called as CF6. So then I can modify this formula a little bit. If I already have PV0 equal to CF1 divided by discount rate, then it means I should have another formula like this. PF5 equal to CF6 divided by interest rate. Similar, the same logic here. What you get, the value will be 1 time point before the first cash flow. Because the first perpetuity cash flow is PV6, is CF6. So it means what I can get with this formula is gonna be PV5. Then I can apply this formula to this question. In this question, I already have 50,000 as my CF6, so that I'm going to use perpetuity formula first. And what I can get with the formula, I will get PV5. So I type down PV5. I apply the formula, I use CF6 divided by discount rate. This will be my PV5, the value at 10.5. So I'm going to give another color here. Yeah. So this is the first step. I just apply the formula. So remember what I mentioned in week 1 is that in this unit, the key idea is not just apply the formula, because applied formula is the easiest part. You just put the number into the formula. The more important thing is that you need to understand the formula. You need to know that if I just use the formula, if you just look at this one, it's just the formula for perpetuity. But you need to understand if I use this formula, what kind of outcome I will get. What you get in this question will be PV5. And eventually we want to know what is the present value. It should be PV0, not PV5. So that will be our next step. So I will show the formula text first. The next step will be discount. Same logic here, discount to PV0. And how can we do this? You can use PV. If you want to get PV0, well, you can do the manual calculation by yourself. If you want, use this one divided by 1 plus discount rate, because you are going to discount for 5 periods. So which means it should be 1 plus interest rate to the power of 5. Represent you are going to discount this PV5 for 5 periods. So that will be the present value for this perpetuity. And sometimes students, they don't like to use this kind of calculation. They don't want to do to the power 5, to the power 4. If you don't like this, you can still use the PV function. If you are using the PV function, rate 12%, amper is 5, represent you are going to discount this cash flow for 5 period. No PMT, because all I want to discount is just PV5. And FV, PV5, and then same result here. And if you want to get a positive result, you do this. Yeah. So eventually you will get exactly the same result. And this is also the key idea of this unit. There are many ways to do the calculation. You can use Excel or your physical calculator. It's up to you. And when you are using Excel, there are also many ways to do the calculation. As long as you have the correct timeline, as long as you know how to do the calculation with Excel, you are not restricted to only one calculation method. So that's the key idea, completely up to you. So that's why we also say that this unit, it requires a lot of practice because there are so many ways to do the calculation, and you need to practice again and again until you know that which one is the one you like to use. And this is question 5, and I would say that question 5 is a very typical questions in this unit, and also a very typical questions in finance, because it involves different types of cash flow structures. You need to know which one is a single cash flow, which one is annuity, which one is perpetuity. And then you also need to know that how to deal with different cash flow structure. If it's annuity, you are going to use the function, the Excel function for annuity. If it's perpetuity, we do not have one function in Excel, but we can use the formula. And the formula, when you are using the formula, you need to be careful with this. You need to know that what you get is one time point before the first cash flow. So in this unit, I think the only exception is that if you use tab as one. But my recommendation is that, my advice is that do not use tab as one. So sometimes the question says this is annuity due. Definitely you know that you are going to use tab as one. But for most questions, the question will not say this is annuity due or ordinary annuity. The question will tell you the cash flows, and eventually you are going to draw the timeline so that you can know the cash flow structure. And after you have the cash flow structure, it's completely up to you. You don't have to use the function for annuity due. You can always use the function for ordinary annuity based on the timeline. So it's completely up to you. And the question 5 will be one great example about this point. So question 5 is a much more challenging question. So this one is very challenging, I would say that. It's because in this question, one thing is because in this question, the story is more complex, the timeline is more complex. And I would say the more important thing in this question is that in this question, you are not restricted to one calculation method. Actually, there are many ways to do the calculation. It's completely up to you. And it depends on your understanding of all these formulas. And the students may have questions about this question. They may have some questions about how to do the calculation, because they may interpret the question in another way. But it doesn't matter which method you are going to use. You should be able to get the correct answer, the correct result for this question. So let's go through the question together, and we draw the timeline that we discuss why this question is very complex, very challenging. So the question says, I'm going to put some deposit into the bank because I'm saving for my children, and they are 2 years apart in age. So the first one, the oldest one, will go to the college 15 years from today, and the other one will begin the college 17 years from today. And after they go to the college, I need to pay the college expenses, and it will be 21,000 per year per child, payable at the start of each school year. So we can stop here for a moment. It says at the start of each school year. When you are looking at this, you know that, well, it feels like this is an annuity due because the cash flow happens at the beginning of the period. So it should be something about annuity due. That's right. But after you draw the timeline, you will find out that, well, it's completely up to you. You can treat this one as annuity due, all is ordinary annuity. It's completely up to you. And then it says interest rate 15%. And the question asks, because I'm going to save money for my children, and then I need to pay the college expense, and I'm going to do the deposit starting from next year. So I'm going to deposit some cash. My deposit begin 1 year from today. And I want to do this year by year. And I will make my last deposit when the oldest child enter college. So which means I'm going to deposit some cash year by year until the first child go to the college, then I stop it. So what's the key idea here? The key idea is that I'm going to deposit some cash. That's one side. The other side is that I'm going to pay the expense. And the logic here is that I want to make sure the value of my deposit should be equal to the value of expense so that I can afford the college expense. That's the logic, that's the idea. And based on questions, then the next step, we are going to draw the timeline. So we start from 10.0, and this will be 1. And starting from 10.1, I'm going to make some deposit. And I don't know how much is it. This is the thing I need to calculate. But I know that I'm going to make some payment here. Or I can just call this as deposit. Yeah. And then 2, 3, until 15. Because after 15 years, the first child will go to the college. And that's the time I need to pay the college fee for the first child. So I call this as first child expense. So at 10.15, I need to pay this college for the first time. And then I need to pay this college fee for 4 years. Yes, I think yes, we do have this information in the question. We are going to pay the college fee for 4 years. So which means for the first child, this 21,000 will start from 10.15 to 10.18. And then I also need to pay the college fee for the second child. And the first payment should start at 10.17 because the other one will begin 17 years from today. And this will be the first college fee for the second child. And I need to pay this for 4 years as well. So this will be the timeline for expenses. And the question says, I'm going to deposit some cash into the bank until the first child enters college. So which means I'm going to pay this deposit until 10.15. This will be my deposit. Now this will be the timeline. And the purpose of, and eventually we need to calculate this one, deposit. We want to know how much money I should deposit into the bank every year so that I can make sure the total value of all these deposits should be equal to the value of expenses. We got some expenses. I use blue to label them, and I use green to label the deposit. The key idea is to make sure the total value of green equal to the total value of blue. That's the idea, and I think we can all understand this. This is not very challenging. As long as you read through the question, you draw the timeline, and you think about your real life, you understand this is the logic. This is the real problem people may face in their real life. We want to make sure the total value of green equal to the total value of blue. So here is the background. Then we are going to do some calculation. Before we do any calculation, before we use any Excel function, then the thing we need to think about is that, well, the cash flow structure is so complex. And how can I do the calculation? There are different types of cash flows. We got something like annuity as the deposit. We also have something like the annuity as the expenses. Then how can I do the calculation? That's the challenging part. But before that, before we really dive into that questions, the purpose is to get deposit. Can anyone tell me which function I should use? In the last step, after I finish all these messy things and eventually I can use one function to get the final result, what will be that function? Our goal is to calculate deposit. This is the payment for every year, starting from year 1 to year 15. And if I want to use one function to calculate this last step, which function I should use? PMT, exactly. So this question is very messy. You have all this information. It's very complex. But you know that eventually I need to use PMT to calculate this deposit because the deposit is some payment for each period is a constant payment for every year. So eventually, I need to use PMT. And we already know this. And then the next question I will think about is that if I'm going to use the PMT function, so normally what kind of information, what kind of data I need to have? If I use the PMT function, normally I need to have rate, and I have rate is 15. NPER, I think I also have NPER because the deposit lasts for 15 period. I need to make a deposit for 15 years. So I know that NPER should be 15. Next question is, do we know anything about PV or FV? That's the challenging part. It seems like we know nothing about PV or FV. Then I will think about, is that possible I can calculate PV or FV by myself? Then I can apply the formula. If we have a cash flow structure like this, let me give you a quick example. Let me give you just a very quick example. Okay. Let's just save file. If I have a timeline like this, I think everyone knows how to calculate PMT. If after I read through the questions, I draw a timeline like this, I think all of you will know how to use the function and get the result. Because you know that, well, I need to get PMT, I know this will be NPER, this will be my future value. We have nothing about PV, so PV is 0, and I got the interest rate as 15%, then it's done. I know how to calculate PMT. And what if I change the question a little bit like this? You also know how to calculate. You also know how to do the calculation, right? You know that I'm going to use the PMT function, and I know PV, but I know nothing about FV, so FV will be 0, but I know PV as 1000, so then I can get PMT. So as long as you are given one PV or one FV, you will be able to do the calculation. Then how can we convert all this information to one PV or one FV? To do that, the goal is to make sure I can put all these 8 numbers, all these 8 blue numbers into one numbers. I want to know the value of all these expenses at this time point. So think about this question. You got this as expenses, this is also expenses, but they are at different timing, they are at different time point. So we cannot just put all them together and do a sum. We need to discount all these cash flows to some time point so that we can put them together. And the thing I'm going to do is that I want to convert all these 8 numbers to 15, to time point, to 10.15. I want to convert all these numbers, all these 8 numbers into this cell. And if I can do this, it means I transfer this timeline into a timeline which you know very well, which means you will treat this one as FV. Then you can apply the PMT function. So how can I do this? To do this, I'm going to convert these 8 values into this cell. And I know the expenses, they are like annuity. So the first step I'm going to do is that I want to deal with the second child expense first. To do this, I'm going to use the annuity function. So let's start with the second child expense. I'm going to use the PV function for annuity. I use rate as 15%. Let me tap rate here. So I use the PV function. Rate as 15%. NPER is just 4 because I have 4 cash flows. And PMT, it should be the one here. Oops, I need to put it back. Yes. Okay. PMT 21,000, and we have nothing with FV, so I just leave FV as blank. Then I use ordinary annuity as the default option. Then I get this. It means if I just apply the PV function for annuity for the second child expense, I can get this number. And this number will be PV16. So this is the thing I mentioned in question 4. If I just apply this formula, what I can get? I get PV16. This will be the value of second child expenses at 10.6. And what you want to get is actually the value at 10.15. So one more step, I want to convert this to PV15. To do this, I can just do the manual calculation. I use this 1 divided by 1 plus 15%. And that's it. So I can put this into a positive number. Yeah. That's the first step. So now we can just use the PV function for annuity so that I can convert these 4 cash flows into 1 numbers here. And next step, I want to deal with the first child expenses. That's the part quite interesting. If I want to deal with the first child expense, can I just apply the function for annuity? If I just apply the function for annuity, if I treat this part as ordinary annuity, then if I just apply the formula, I will get the value here at 10.50 at 10.14. That's not the value I want to get. So there will be 2 ways to do this calculation. First one, I can just use the PV function, but I change type to 1. I still use rate as 15%, amper still 4, PMT 21,000, future value as 0 or as blank, then I set type as 1, which means I treat the expense of first child as annuity due. So when I use this formula, here, what I can get? When I use this formula, what I get here is PV, what number here? If I just apply the formula for annuity, but I set type as 1 for the first child expense, eventually what I get here is PV 15, 16, or 14. What's the number here? It will be PV 15 because we are using the formula for annuity due. I set type as 1, which means we treat this part as annuity due. And if you use the formula for annuity due, what you can get is the value at the same time point of the first cash flow, which is PV 15. And then I don't have to do any other calculation. I can just put these 2 together. That will be the value at 10.15. So which means eventually I convert these 8 numbers here into this one single number. So which means now the timeline, it feels like you got deposit, and then you got 1 numbers here. And this will be 0, 1, 2, until 15. And this will be the PMT, this will be the FV, this will be your new timeline here. Because I have done the calculation so that I get the number here. And then the final step will be much more straightforward. You can just apply the PMT function so that you can get the deposit value. We use rate as 15. Amper, now it will be 15 periods. PV, in this timeline, we do not have any other cash flows at 10.0, so PV as 0. FV will be this one. And tap will be 0 because now it's annuity. Now it's the default option is the ordinary annuity. And then you will be able to get the result. And if you want to get the positive number, you put a negative sign here. This will be the value of deposit you should make for every period. And this is how we do the calculation if you use type as 1. What if I don't want to use type as 1? And I will never use type as 1 because I don't like it. I worry that I may make mistakes during the exam. So I don't want to do this type of 0 and 1, this type of things during my exam. Can I just use type as zero all the time? Yes, you can do that. Another way to do this calculation for first child expense is that we can look at 16, 17, 18 as the annuity. In this case, it means I'm going to use the PV function. Rate will be 15%. Input now becomes 3. So which means I ignore the value at 15 first. I ignore it. I only look at 16, 17, and 18. PMT is still 21,000. FV still 0, and type now I set as 0. I treat this as annuity due. Then what I can get here, it will be PV 15. But it's not all the things at 10.15, right? Because we just ignore this 21 here. So which means this will be the formula for this one. And change this to positive first. Yeah. So this will be the value of CF16, CF17, CF18. But I ignore CF15. So which means I need to manually add back this one here. Then I can get exactly the same number here. So it's completely up to you. It depends on how you treat this timeline. If you look at this part as a whole, then you will need to use the formula for annuity due. But if you look at 16, 17, 18 as a group first, and then you manually add back cash flow 15, then you can use the formula for ordinary annuity all the time. So it's completely up to you. So this is how we do the calculation for this question. So this question is much more complex than you think. For the interest of time, I'm not going to show the second method to do this calculation, but you can think about this by yourself. If I can get the value of all these blue cells at 10.15, is that possible I get the value at 10.0? If I discount all these blue cells to 10.0, can I also use this formula, a very similar formula like this one, to get the final result? The answer is yes. So the answer to this question is that after you have this timeline, after you have this, and there are many ways to do the calculation. You can use annuity due, you can use ordinary annuity, you can use FV, you can use PV. It's completely up to you. So I hope you can understand. I hope you can get some insights from this question. Is that the calculation part is completely up to you. You can choose the one you like. You can choose the one you understand the most. But the first step, you need to draw the timeline and you need to understand what's the key idea of this question. Okay, so that's all for this tutorial. And if you've got any questions, you can feel free to take a photo or you can just turn on your mic and ask. And if you have no other questions, I will see you next week. And by the way, the post-class online exercise 1 has been released this week. So you can go check that exercise right now, but the due date will be next Sunday. Okay, so that's all for this week. I will see you next week. Okay, thank you.